Welcome back. Let's reading some more. It's Tuesday today. So let's read about the colony in Virginia. Just follow this. So I think I should drive a little bit American Truck Simulator today. I feel a little tired today. So I just got up my bed and I'm very sleepy. Very morning, so I not like to talk so much. It's 10 a.m. My computer make noise, I'm sorry, but this I cannot do it different. I need a new computer. An old computer. I need half a minute to get to my bed. I think I like to drive Truck Simulator, American Truck Simulator. That's many weeks ago I did that. Do that to relax, or just driving around and explore the world map.
Colony of Virginia. The colony of Virginia was a British colonial settlement in North America from 1606 to 1776. The first effort to create an English settlement in the area was chartered in 1584 and established in 1585. The resulting Roanoke colony lasted for 3 attempts totaling 6 years. In 1590, the colony was abandoned. But nearly 20 years later, the colony was resettled at Jamestown, not far north of the original site. A second charter was issued in 1606 and settled in 1607, becoming the first enduring English colony in North America. It followed failed attempts at settlement on Newfoundland by Sir Humphrey Gilbert in 1583 and the Roanoke colony, in modern eastern North Carolina, by Sir Walter Raleigh in the late 1580s. The founder of the Jamestown colony was the Virginia Company, chartered by King James I, with its first 2 settlements being in Jamestown on the north bank of the James River and Popham Colony on the Kennebec River in modern-day Maine, both in 1607. The Popham Colony quickly failed because of famine, disease, and conflicts with local Native American tribes in the first 2 years. Jamestown occupied land belonging to the Powhatan Confederacy. It was also on the brink of failure before the arrival of a new group of settlers and supplies by ship in 1610. Tobacco became Virginia's first profitable export, the production of which had a significant impact on the society and settlement patterns. In 1624, the Virginia Company's charter was revoked by King James I, and the Virginia colony was transferred to royal authority as a crown colony. After the English Civil War in the 1640s and 1650s, the Virginia colony was nicknamed the Old Dominion by King Charles II for its perceived loyalty to the English monarchy during the era of the Protectorate and Commonwealth of England. from 1619 to 1775/1776, the colonial legislature of Virginia was the General Assembly, which governed in conjunction with the colonial governor. Jamestown remained the capital of the Virginia colony until 1699. From 1699 until its dissolution, the capital was in Williamsburg. The colony experienced its first significant political turmoil with Bacon's Rebellion of 1676. After declaring independence from the Kingdom of Great Britain in 1775, before the Declaration of Independence was officially adopted, the Virginia colony became the Commonwealth of Virginia, one of the original 13 states of the United States, adopting as its official slogan the Old Dominion. The entire modern states of West Virginia, Kentucky, Indiana, Illinois, Wisconsin and Michigan, and portions of Ohio, western Pennsylvania and Minnesota were later created from the territory encompassed, or claimed by, Virginia during the American Revolutionary War. Etymology, edit. Virginia, edit. Virginia is the oldest designation for English claims in North America. In 1584, Sir Walter Raleigh sent Philip Amadas and Arthur Barlow to explore what is now the North Carolina coast. They returned with word of a regional king, Wierowance, named Wingana, who ruled a land supposedly called Wingandaco. Virginia was originally a term used to refer to England's entire North American possession and claim along the east coast from the 34th parallel, close to Cape Fear, north to the 45th parallel. This area included a large section of Canada and the shores of Acadia. The name Virginia for a region in North America may have been originally suggested by Raleigh, who named it for Queen Elizabeth I in approximately 1584. In addition, the term Wingandaco may have influenced the name Virginia. On his next voyage, Raleigh learned that while the chief of the Secretans was indeed called Wingana, the expression Wingandaco heard by the English upon arrival actually meant what good clothes you wear, in Carolina Algonquin, and was not the name of the country as previously misunderstood. The colony was also known as the Virginia Colony, the Province of Virginia, and occasionally as the Dominion and Colony of Virginia or His Majesty's Most Ancient Colony and Dominion of Virginia. Old Dominion, edit. According to tradition, in gratitude for the loyalty of Virginians to the Crown during the English Civil War, Charles II gave it the title of Old Dominion. The colony seal stated from Latin en that Virginia quintum, in English behold, Virginia gives the fifth, with Virginia claimed as the fifth English dominion after England, France, Scotland and Ireland. The Commonwealth of Virginia maintains Old Dominion as its state nickname. The athletic teams of the University of Virginia are known as the Cavaliers, referring to supporters of Charles II, and Virginia has a public university called Old Dominion University. History, edit. See also, History of Virginia. Although Spain, France, Sweden, and the Netherlands all had competing claims to the region, none of these prevented the English from becoming the first European power to colonize successfully the mid-Atlantic coastline. The Spanish had made earlier attempts in what is now Georgia, San Miguel de Guildap, 1526–1527, several Spanish missions in Georgia between 1568 and 1684, South Carolina, Santa Elena, 1566–1587, North Carolina, Jora, 1567–1568, and Virginia, Ajacan Mission, 1570–1571, and by the French in South Carolina, Charles Fort, 1562–1563. Farther south, the Spanish colony of Spanish Florida, centered on St. Augustine, was established in 1565, while to the north, the French were establishing settlements in what is now Canada. Charles Vaudreuil briefly occupied 1541–1543, Port Royal, established in 1605. Colonization attempts in the New World, 1583–1590, edit. In 1583, Sir Humphrey Gilbert established a charter in Newfoundland. Once established, he and his crew abandoned the site and returned to England. On the return trip, Gilbert's ship capsized, and all aboard perished. The charter was abandoned. In 1585, Raleigh sent his first colonization mission to Roanoke Island, in present-day North Carolina, with over 100 male settlers. However, when Sir Francis Drake arrived at the colony in the summer of 1586, the colonists opted to return to England because there was a lack of supply ships, abandoning the colony. Supply ships arrived at the abandoned colony later in 1586. 15 soldiers were left behind to hold the island, but no trace of these men was later found. In 1587, Raleigh sent another group to attempt to establish a permanent settlement. The expedition leader, John White, returned to England for supplies that same year but was unable to return to the colony because of the war between England and Spain. When he finally did return in 1590, he found the colony abandoned. The houses were intact, but the colonists had disappeared. Although there are numerous theories about the fate of the colony, it remains a mystery and has come to be known as the Lost Colony. 2 English children were born in this colony. The first was named Virginia Dare. Dare County, North Carolina, was named in her honor, who was among those whose fate is unknown. The word Croatoan was found carved into a tree, the name of a tribe on a nearby island. Virginia Company, 1606–1624, edit. Main article, Virginia Company. Following the failure of the previous colonization attempts, England resumed attempts to set up colonies. This time, joint stock companies were used rather than giving extensive grants to a landed proprietor such as Gilbert or Raleigh. Charter of 1606, edit. Main article, Charter of 1606. King James granted a proprietary charter to 2 competing branches of the Virginia Company, which investors supported. These were the Plymouth Company and the Virginia Company of London. By the terms of the charter, the Plymouth Company was permitted to establish a colony of 100 square mi, 260 kilometers, between the 38th parallel and the 45th parallel, roughly between Chesapeake Bay and the current U.S. Canada border. The London Company was permitted to establish between the 34th parallel and the 41st parallel, approximately between Cape Fear and Long Island Sound, and also owned a large portion of Atlantic and inland Canada. In the area of overlap, the 2 companies were not permitted to establish colonies within 100 miles of each other. During 1606, each company organized expeditions to establish settlements within the area of their rights. The London Company formed Jamestown in its exclusive territory, while the Plymouth Company formed the Popham Colony in its exclusive territory near what is now Phippsburg, Maine. The Popham Colony quickly failed because of famine, disease, and conflicts with local Native American tribes in the first 2 years. Jamestown, edit. Main article, History of the Jamestown Settlement, 1607–1699. The London Company hired Captain Christopher Newport to lead its expedition. On the 20th of December, 1606, he set sail from England with his flagship, the Susan Constant, and two smaller ships, the Godspeed and the Discovery, with 105 men and boys, plus 39 sailors. After an unusually long voyage of 144 days, they arrived at the mouth of the Chesapeake Bay and came ashore at the point where the southern side of the bay meets the Atlantic Ocean, an event that has come to be called the First Landing. They erected a cross and named the point of land Cape Henry in honor of Henry Frederick, Prince of Wales, the eldest son of King James. They were instructed to select a location inland along a waterway where they would be less vulnerable to the Spanish or other Europeans seeking to establish colonies. They sailed westward into the bay and reached the mouth of Hampton Roads, stopping at a location now known as Old Point Comfort. Keeping the shoreline to their right, they then ventured up the largest river, which they named the James, for their king. After exploring at least as far upriver as the confluence of the Appomattox River at present-day Hopewell, they returned downstream to Jamestown Island, which offered a favorable defensive position against enemy ships and deep-water anchorage adjacent to the land. Within 2 weeks, they had constructed their first fort and named their settlement Jamestown. In addition to securing gold and other precious minerals to send back to the waiting investors in England, the survival plan for the Jamestown colonists depended upon regular supplies from England and trade with the Native Americans. They selected a location largely cut off from the mainland with little game for hunting, no natural fresh drinking water, and minimal ground for farming. Captain Newport returned to England twice, delivering the first and second supply missions during 1608 and leaving the Discovery for the colonists' use. However, death from disease and conflicts with the Native Americans took a fearsome toll on the colonists. Despite attempts at mining minerals, growing silk, and exporting the native Virginia tobacco, no profitable exports had been identified, and it was unclear whether the settlement would survive financially. The Powhatan Confederacy was a confederation of numerous linguistically related tribes in the eastern part of Virginia. The Powhatan Confederacy controlled a territory known as Senacomaca, which roughly corresponded with the Tidewater region of Virginia. It was in this territory that the English established Jamestown. At the time of the English arrival, the Powhatan were led by the paramount chief Weyhunsenacor, known to the English as Chief Powhatan. Popham Colony, edit. On the 31st of May, 1607, about 100 men and boys left England for what is now Maine. Approximately 3 months later, the group landed on a wooded peninsula where the Kennebec River meets the Atlantic Ocean and began building Fort St. George. By the end of the year, limited resources caused half of the colonists to return to England. The remaining 45 sailed home late the next year, and the Plymouth Company fell dormant. Charter of 1609. The London Company expands, edit. Main article, Second Virginia Charter. In 1609, with the abandonment of the Plymouth Company settlement, the London Company's Virginia Charter was adjusted to include the territory north of the 34th parallel and south of the 40th parallel, with its original coastal grant extended from sea to sea. Thus, according to James I's writ, the Virginia colony in its original sense extended to the coast of the Pacific Ocean, in what is now California, with all the land in between belonging to Virginia. For practical purposes, though, the colonists rarely ventured far inland to what was known as the Virginia Wilderness. Third Supply, edit. For the Third Supply, the London Company had a new ship built. The Sea Venture was designed to emit additional colonists and transport supplies. It became the flagship of the Admiral of the convoy, Sir George Somers. The third supply was the largest, with 8 other ships joining the Sea Venture. The captain of the Sea Venture was the mission's Vice Admiral Christopher Newport. Hundreds of new colonists were aboard the ships. However, the weather was to affect the mission drastically. A few days out of London, the 9 ships of the third supply mission encountered a hurricane in the Atlantic Ocean. They became separated during the 3 days the storm lasted. Admiral Somers had the Sea Venture, carrying most of the mission's supplies, deliberately driven aground onto the reefs of Bermuda to avoid sinking. However, while there was no loss of life, the ship was wrecked beyond repair, stranding its survivors on the uninhabited archipelago, to which they laid claim for England. The survivors at Bermuda eventually built 2 smaller ships, and most of them continued to Jamestown, leaving a few on Bermuda to secure the claim. The company's possession of Bermuda was made official in 1612 when the third and final charter extended the boundaries of Virginia far enough out to sea to encompass Bermuda. Upon their arrival at Jamestown, the survivors of the Sea Venture discovered that the 10-month delay had greatly aggravated other adverse conditions. 7 of the other ships had arrived carrying more colonists but little in the way of food and supplies. Combined with drought and hostile relations with the Native Americans, the loss of the supplies that had been aboard the Sea Venture resulted in the starving time in late 1609 to May 1610, during which over 80% of the colonists perished. Conditions were so adverse it appears, from skeletal evidence, that the survivors engaged in cannibalism. The survivors from Bermuda had brought few supplies and food with them, and it appeared to all that Jamestown must be abandoned, and it would be necessary to return to England. Abandonment and Fourth Supply, edit. Samuel Argall was the captain of one of the 7 ships of the third supply that arrived at Jamestown in 1609 after being separated from the Sea Venture, whose fate was unknown. Depositing his passengers and limited supplies, he returned to England with word of the colonists' plight at Jamestown. The king authorized another leader, Thomas West, 3rd Baron de la Warr, later better known as Lord Delaware, to have greater powers, and the London Company organized another supply mission. They set sail from London on the 1st of April, 1610. Just after the survivors of the starving time and those who had joined them from Bermuda had abandoned Jamestown, the ships of the new supply mission sailed up the James River with food, supplies, a doctor, and more colonists. Lord Delaware was determined that the colony was to survive, and he intercepted the departing ships about 10 miles, 16 kilometers, downstream of Jamestown. The colonists thanked Providence for the colony's salvation. West proved far harsher and more belligerent toward the Indians than any of his predecessors, engaging in wars of conquest against them. He first sent Thomas Gates to drive off the Kicottan from their village on the 9th of July, 1610, then gave Chief Powhatan an ultimatum to either return all English subjects and property, or face war. Powhatan responded by insisting that the English either stay in their fort or leave Virginia. Enraged, De la Warr had the hand of a Paspahegh captive cut off and sent him to the paramount chief with another ultimatum: return all English subjects and property, or the neighboring villages would be burned. This time, Powhatan did not respond. First Anglo-Powhatan War, 1610–1614, edit. On the 9th of August, 1610, tired of waiting for a response from the Powhatan, West sent George Percy with 70 men to attack the Paspahegh capital, burning the houses and cutting down their cornfields. They killed 65 to 75 Powhatan and captured one of Wawinkapunk's wives and her children. Returning downstream, Percy's men threw the children overboard and shot out their brains in the water. The Queen was put to the sword in Jamestown. The Paspahegh never recovered from this attack and abandoned their town. Another small force sent with Argol against the Waraskoyaks found that they had already fled, and they destroyed an abandoned Waraskoyak village and the surrounding cornfields. This event triggered the First Anglo-Powhatan War. Among the individuals who had briefly abandoned Jamestown was John Rolfe, a sea venture survivor who had lost his wife and son in Bermuda. He was a businessman from London with some untried seeds for new, sweeter strains of tobacco he brought from Bermuda and some novel marketing ideas. It would turn out that Rolfe held the key to the colony's economic success. By 1612, Rolfe's strains of tobacco had been successfully cultivated and exported, establishing a first cash crop for export. Plantations and new outposts sprung up starting with Henricus, initially both upriver and downriver along the navigable portion of the James and thereafter along the other rivers and waterways of the area. The settlement at Jamestown could finally be considered permanently established. A period of peace followed the marriage in 1614 of colonist Rolfe to Pocahontas, the daughter of Chief Powhatan. Another colonial charter was issued in 1611. Second Anglo-Powhatan War, 1622–1632, edit. The relations with the natives took a turn for the worse after the death of Pocahontas in England and the return of Rolfe and other colonial leaders in May 1617. Disease, poor harvests, and the growing demand for land to cultivate tobacco caused hostilities to escalate. After Chief Powhatan died in 1618, he was succeeded by his own younger brother, Opeshankana. On the surface, he maintained friendly relations with the English, negotiating with them through his warrior Nematanu. Still, by 1622, after Nematanu had been slain, Opeshankana was ready to order a limited surprise attack on the colonists, hoping to persuade them to move on and settle elsewhere. Chief Opeshankana organized and led a well-coordinated series of surprise attacks on multiple English colonial settlements along both sides of a 50-mile, 80 kilometers, long stretch of the James River, which took place early on the morning of the 22nd of March, 1622. This event resulted in the deaths of 347 colonists, including men, women, and children, and the abduction of many others. The massacre caught most of the Virginia colony by surprise and virtually wiped out several entire communities, including Henricus and Wallsden hometown at Martin's Hundred. Jamestown was spared from destruction because an Indian boy named Chinko learned of the planned attacks from his brother and warned colonist Richard Pace, with whom he lived. Pace, after securing himself and his neighbors on the south side of the James River, took a canoe across the river to warn Jamestown, which narrowly escaped destruction. However, there was no time to warn the other settlements. A year later, Captain William Tucker and John Pott worked out a truce with the Powhatan and proposed a toast using liquor laced with poison. 200 Virginia Indians were killed or made ill by the poison, and 50 more were slaughtered by the colonists. For over a decade, the English settlers attacked the Powhatan, targeting their settlements as part of a scorched earth policy. The settlers systematically razed villages, captured children, and seized or destroyed crops. By 1634, a 6-mile-long palisade was completed across the Virginia Peninsula. The palisade provided some security from attacks by the Virginia Indians for colonists farming and fishing lower on the peninsula from that point. On the 18th of April, 1644, Opeshankana again tried to force the English to abandon the region with another series of coordinated attacks, killing almost 500 colonists. However, this was a smaller proportion of the growing population than had been killed in the 1,622 attacks. Crown Colony, 1624-1652, edit. In 1620, a successor to the Plymouth Company sent colonists to the New World aboard the Mayflower. Known as Pilgrims, they successfully established a settlement in what became Massachusetts. The portion of what had been Virginia north of the 40th parallel became known as New England, according to books written by Captain John Smith, who had made a voyage there. In 1624, the charter of the Virginia Company was revoked by King James I, and the Virginia colony was transferred to royal authority in the form